Good evening, everybody. Welcome. I'm Mark Katchis. I am the editor of the Tampa Bay Times, and it's a pleasure to welcome you here tonight to our Spotlight Sustainability Series presented by Tampa Electric. We're really excited to have you here with us tonight. I want to start by giving a big thank you to Feeding Tampa Bay for hosting us in this terrific venue. Thank you so much for having us. Yeah, thank you. And I want to thank our generous sponsors at Tampa Electric for making events like this a possibility. And I'm going to invite up Stephanie Smith, the Vice President hi Stephanie, the Vice President of State and Regional Affairs at Tampa Electric. She's got a 20-year history in government relations and public affairs. She earned her bachelor's degree in political science at Florida State University. Yeah, give it up. Before going straight to work in the State House for Governor Jeb Bush and then Governor Charlie Crist, and transitioned to the private sector, working for companies like AT&T and Uber before joining Tampa Electric 3 years ago. She's also deeply involved in the community. She serves on a number of boards, including as chair of Florida Career Source, appointed by Governor DeSantis. So please welcome to the stage Stephanie Smith.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. Again, my name is Stephanie Smith, and I'm with Tampa Electric, and we are honored and privileged to be able to sponsor this event this evening, this conversation. And it's truly a full circle moment for us to be hosting this here at Feeding Tampa Bay. We've been a long time supporter of this organization, and we couldn't be more proud to be here. And kudos to Thomas, wherever he is. We're really proud to be able to host this here. So we're also really honored to be able to partner with Tampa Bay Times to put on these really timely conversation, a really important discussion that needs to happen this evening. As you know, at Tampa Electric, we power a large portion of Tampa Bay, all of Hillsborough County, and portions of Pinellas, Pasco, and Polk. Right now, we're roughly at 860,000 residences and homes in the region, and that number just continues to grow every day as folks look to relocate to the area with their families or to relocate their businesses to grow. So our energy solutions were essential to successful and sustainable development in West Central Florida, where, again, residents, visitors, and businesses are expecting and deserve the modern conveniences, industry, and commerce that our electricity enables. As an electric utility, we partner with the business development community, some of which are represented up here, to implement solutions that will help them enable their prosperity. And some of these solutions include planning for energy capacity to meet the growth and demand that they are seeking, designing our infrastructure accordingly, and offering energy audits and programs to help the business community operate sustainably. Tampa Electric is tackling the inherent challenges of delivering reliable power in our growing region because we know it enhances the quality of life for Tampa Bay residents, economic prosperity for our businesses, and environmental stewardship for all. Here with us tonight, we do have some of our Tampa Electric team members and the energy savings programs in the back. Hopefully you had a chance to talk with them. If not, a lot of those programs can be found on our website. We also have members of our economic development team, which work closely with a lot of the developers here in the region, and as well as my team with external affairs, which interact with a lot of the local governments here in the region. I thank you so much for your attention tonight and for being here and being a part of this conversation. And with that, Mark, there you are. I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Stephanie. So Spotlight Tampa Bay is an initiative that we launched almost a couple years ago now. We were just talking in the back about the fact that we did our first one, and Rebecca, you were on it, and Melissa, you were on the very first one we did a couple of years ago. It is an opportunity for us to engage thought leaders, experts, and stakeholders to confront some of the really big issues facing our community, our region, and our state. And sustainable, responsible development, that is a big one. That is a big one, especially in light of the traumatic hurricane season we all endured. I'm sure many of you in this room were directly affected by the hurricane. Every one of us was affected in some way. Just this, I have to say, I live 1 block away in South Tampa from a neighborhood that was inundated by floodwaters in Helene. On my morning walk this morning, I'm walking through the neighborhood, and there are still homeowners trying to piece their lives back together, still trying to get back into their homes just in time for another hurricane season. If you drove across the Gandy Bridge from St. Petersburg to get here tonight, you would have gone right past on Gandy Boulevard to the right of Gandy Boulevard. There are acres of land that are being graded for development. Just to the left of Gandy Boulevard, and I hope you took the Selman Expressway to get all the way here because it's a pretty quick shot, but just to the left of Gandy, there is a residential neighborhood, a whole new neighborhood that is getting primed to be built eventually, of multi-million-dollar homes right on the edge of the bay, right? Last night we saw a condo in Clearwater, 12-story condo, evacuated because of cracks in the parking garage structure in which 12 stories were resting upon, conjuring up images of what happened in the southern part of the state a couple years ago. Just today, we reported that the building that we inhabited for 100 years at the Tampa Bay Times will be torn down by the owner of that building. It was destroyed in Hurricane Milton by a construction crane. We saw also during the hurricane that, you know, we don't have, our infrastructure is fragile. Pumping stations failed, sewage systems repeatedly could not do their job, and that affected a lot of us here. So there's a lot to talk about, a lot to think about as we try to find that right sweet spot between serving a fast-growing region in Tampa Bay and responsibly developing, meeting the needs of that growing population. I'm going to turn this over in a minute to our moderator, Rebecca Leibson. Rebecca, give her a round of applause, folks. She's one of our stars. Rebecca has been with the Tampa Bay Times now for almost 3 years. She covers real estate. For the last year, she reported with a colleague who's here tonight, Tegan Simonton, a 7-part series called Buying Up the Bay that focused on how out-of-state corporate real estate interests had amassed massive portfolios of single-family homes across the state of Florida, over 100,000 homes owned by out-of-state corporate interests, really significantly altering the complexion of the real estate market in our region and throughout the entire state of Florida. That was great work that Rebecca and Tegan have done. It's the kind of work that holds the powerful accountable and gives voice to the voiceless. They did it. We do it. That is an important part of who we are and what we do at the Tampa Bay Times. But we can't do it alone. So I'm going to make one last plug before I turn it over to this panel. Next week, we are going to launch our It's Your Times campaign. It is the one time a year that in a very concerted way, we have a week-long fundraising campaign to raise money in our community. Last year, almost 1,000 people contributed around Tampa Bay. We raised over $125,000. This year, the goal will be $175,000. It's an ambitious goal, but our journalistic ambitions are also are high. $175,000 would be enough to fund 3 reporting positions in an 80-person newsroom, and we would appreciate all of you thinking about or giving some consideration to supporting us. That campaign, again, launches Sunday, runs for a full week, and we hope you will consider the opportunity to support your journalists at our newsroom. So with that, I'm going to turn it over now to Rebecca to get this great conversation started. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Mark. Before we get started, one quick note. There is going to be an opportunity for our audience members here to ask questions. If you have a question you'd like to ask, our team will be going around and distributing question cards. They'll be picking them up through the discussion as well. We'll get to all those at the end, but if at any point you think of a question you want to ask, just raise your hand and they'll come bring you a card. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our great panelists that we have here this evening. Right next to me, we have Kartik Goyani. He is the principal at Metro Development Group. They're one of the big home builders we have here in the Tampa Bay area. You've probably seen their developments. They've got Merida with the fantastic lagoon. So that is Metro. Then we have Melissa Zornita. She is the executive director of Plan Hillsborough, and she's the one managing long-range comprehensive planning for Tampa, Temple Terrace, Plant City, and the unincorporated parts of Hillsborough County. Right beside her is Taylor Ralph. He's the president and founder of Real Building Consultants, LLC. And his award-winning consulting firm provides sustainability consulting for some of the big projects we have here, including the Gasworks development in Tampa. Next up is Casey Ellison. He's CEO of Ellison Companies. And over 20 plus years, he has built and developed placemaking projects, including Armature Works in Tampa, and now he's working on the Central in St. Pete's Edge District. And then last but not least, we have Abby Feely. She is the City of Tampa's Administrator for Development and Economic Opportunity. She was appointed to the role last year and has over 25 years of public service with the city. Okay, jumping straight into it. So in a lot of these discussions about the future of cities, we hear this term smart growth getting tossed around. So just to get that out of the way, what does smart growth mean to all of you? And if you have examples of how we're already using smart growth in the Tampa Bay area, we'd love to hear them. Or if there's examples of things we could be doing that other cities are doing to utilize smart growth, we'd love to hear those as well. Abby, do you want to kick us off here?
Sure. Good evening. In relation to smart growth, I think there's a couple different approaches to that, and that's, I always talk about the infrastructure of our city being the bones of our city, and as you know, we've seen tremendous growth, definitely over the past 25 years. When I started with the city in 1999, we were very different than we are today, and even in the past 5 years, we're incredibly different than we were. So looking at what supports that growth, and a lot of us don't see that. It lives under our streets and in our infrastructure. Part of that is since 2019, we have spent $2.9 billion on the PIPES program, and that addressed aging water and wastewater systems. Over 62 miles of aging water system and over 209 miles of aging wastewater system. So keeping up and making those infrastructure improvements in order to be able to support the growth that is happening is smart growth to me. It's not always having energy efficient type buildings, which that is smart growth as well. And then one of the things we've seen coming out of the hurricane season last year was that many of our single-family residential homes were impacted, and in order to build those back and be smart about it, ensuring that those homes meet the new standards for development is critical. And in some cases, that is elevated homes that allow water and storm surge to flow through underneath those homes. And in some cases, that is breakaway development in some senses. In fact, coming here tonight, this facility was built with smart design that had to accommodate for storm surge I remembered seeing it on the site plans and how we were able to develop it in a way that it would sustain storm surge or water that might come in the building. So I think a couple of those. And then one thing I wanted to touch on real quick, not to be long-winded, is Tampa Forward. We're currently updating our land development code. It has not been done since the late 1980s. And that will drive the land development patterns and the land uses along our major corridors in ways that can support smarter growth. That meaning transit, that meaning protection of neighborhoods, so that we have an awareness to that. I even see some folks out in the audience tonight that have been to several of those meetings. So that is a huge initiative that is going to impact how we grow and how we move forward in a more sustainable and smart way. Thanks.
Anyone else? Feel free to jump in here if you got a good answer.
I can jump in. We've kind of heard the word smart growth, smart city, kind of like tossed around for a long time. So like driving here, and when I got here, I'm like, let me just see what ChatGPT has to say about it. Like, who actually coined it, and what was the concept? And the answer was very simple. The concept of smart growth, smart urbanism, smart city came from a very simple thing on how do you enhance the quality of life for people? How do you make it less stressful? How do you make it exciting that people kind of enjoy where they're living and not just focus like on one part? And we strongly believe that has to be a part of the conversation. So it's not just about, as Abby said, an energy efficient building or one that withstands hurricanes. You want all of those, but at the same time, what is it that people would be passionate about, super excited, and when they live in a place, they're like, yeah, I feel really great living here. I want my family to be here and grow up here. So that's kind of, when we started thinking about smart, those were kind of the thoughts just going through our mind. And the other thing is just being here with smart people. I'm sure we'll get to learn a lot more about other smart ways too. So just my 2 cents.
Well, I think since Abby and Kartik mentioned energy efficiency and that being a part of the smart growth story, but not all of it, I agree. I think that smart growth is really about utilizing your resources responsibly and capitalizing on the infrastructure that we have in place already to build the city of the future. So to me, growth doesn't mean growing outward necessarily. It also means being smarter about where we're growing and how we're growing. And I think that's a good example of what's happening at the Gasworks project and other projects that we'll speak about tonight, is creating those communities that don't require you to get in a car and pollute your way to your job, where you can actually walk to the store, you can walk to work, you can live amongst a mixed-use development or within a community that already has those aspects, so that you're actually reducing your footprint on a day-to-day basis without even having to really make any conscious decisions other than where you live. And I think that in our region, we have a lot of opportunities to grow in infill locations that wouldn't require us to grow further out into natural lands and protected lands and things like that. And I think we have to think about, how do we grow? Are we growing doesn't mean growing outward. It also means growing up. It means getting smarter about what we're doing in terms of density, in terms of transit, in terms of a lot of things. But I think that you have the infrastructure in place. You can replace the infrastructure and make it better. You must be energy efficient. You must be water efficient. You must be storm efficient. Because if you're not, that infrastructure that you're building is going to be inadequate before you know it, and you're going to be right back at having to put new infrastructure in again. So we must be responsible with all of our resources and reduce our consumption, because the less water I'm putting into the wastewater system or the less storm water that's leaving my site is the less money that the city of Tampa has to spend on all of that infrastructure and all of those impacts.
And I would just build upon what you said, Taylor, that I think what we've heard throughout all of our planning processes for not only the city, but for the unincorporated county and for Plant City, that so much about what we need to plan for is about choices. And we need to have an urban choice and a suburban choice and a rural choice in our community. And through time and time again, that's what we've heard, and that's what's special about, in particular, Hillsborough County, is that we have those three choices, and we need to retain those. So how do we do that? We need to have redevelopment and infill within cities, like within the city of Tampa, within some of our infill suburban communities like Brandon and the university area and Town and Country and Palm River. But we also need to identify ways to build smartly within new suburban areas, like around Plant City, where they're growing outward and they're annexing new areas. And how can we replicate the mixed use and walkability and connectivity that's needed, that people want to enhance their quality of life in settings like that as well? And how can we align that with choices so that people aren't just having to use a car all the time, but also have choices around transit and walking and biking and doing that safely in their community. A lot of places in our community don't have all of those choices, and our plans call that they should have all of those choices available to them. And so hopefully, to me, that's what smart growth would look like, is us having all of those choices.
I think for us, smart growth is something that we talk about in many forms when we're contemplating a development. One is, I believe that density is the best friend of smart growth in the right areas. So in our central business district, Ybor City, our urban markets, the more density, the better. And I know that that's shocking to hear me say, but the reason I believe that is exactly what Taylor was saying, is then we can intertwine the right uses and people can have an ecosystem to live in. And you know, when we look at these and contemplate these, we spend a ton of time on the ground plane, the first 20 feet of the building, and then the hardscapes that are outside of that first 20 feet, because if that area of the project is planned well and can be truly utilized and used comfortably in our climate, then you're taking load off the transportation systems and all the other systems, because they're coming in from wherever they are working, if they're not working at home, and they're there. And you know, in St. Pete, at the Central, we have 140,000 square feet of office. We have a 168-room hotel, 42 affordable housing units or workforce housing units, and a parking garage with an amenity deck on top. And really, you could live, work, play, and recreate right there. And you don't have to stress the system around you to live. And so we're doing the same thing in Tampa at the Y. We're spending tons and tons of time on the ground plane. And by the way, Taylor's on both projects with us. St. Pete is a lead project, which I think plays into smart growth as well. But I do think energy efficiency, all of those things, I think 5-10 years ago, that was something you really had to pay attention to. Now, the way the codes are written and the way that we're building buildings due to many aspects, not just energy efficiency, all those systems are there. Like we're doing all the right things from a energy consumption, water consumption standpoint naturally, or not naturally, but because it is just in the system now. So, you know, I think again, density and doing it in the right places is a core component of smart growth.
So oftentimes when we talk about growth, some of the developments that get the most buzz or attract the most attention are the ones close to our downtown centers, like the gas works, the Water Street, the gas plant district. But a lot of the growth that we're seeing is actually pushing out into some of our more rural areas. For instance, what was once farmland in Hillsborough and Pasco County is being turned into large housing developments. So how can we make sure that we're accommodating all of the people that are moving to Florida with this population boom that we're having, while still making sure we're preserving the natural character and the more rural character that makes this state special? Kartik, I think this applies closely to some of the work you do. Do you want to start?
Sure, I'll be happy to take it. So it's It's a great question, and here's how we think about it. What, obviously, the land is finite in the urban environment, but we like to think about it differently. What is the American dream? What does the average American family want? And you want a place for your kids to play. You want a backyard so you can have your pets, dogs out there. But more importantly, let me help you set the scene, right? So if you can create an environment, and if it doesn't exist, you build it. That's what we focus on, where I'm kind of going to walk you through a hypothetical, but a very real scenario. Family, you kind of wake up, you want to take the kids to school. Well, fantastic. I mean, how great would it be? You get them dressed up, and you could just get in your golf cart and take them to the school, drop them at the school. You want to hit the yoga class, grab a coffee. Perfect, you could just walk over there or go on your e-bike. And after that, you have a couple options. You can go to your smart connected home and be connected to high-speed internet and work from home, or you could just jump on your scooter and walk to or bike to your office campus that you have right in your community, and then when the day is over, pick up your kids, take them to the large, regional parks where they can throw ball, play with the pets, meet other kids, and then you go, hang out at the lagoon, grab a drink, and all said and done, you go back home, and we see more and more people, so sometimes you just have to create what we call as walkable suburbs, because not everyone, as much as people would like to be, can afford to live or can find the large pieces of land in the urban area. So we try to learn from what people want, what really works in a smart, responsible way, and then we know that it doesn't exist, so we kind of try to do a decent enough job at creating something and then adding elements of sustainability, resiliency, like with our lagoon. I mean, it's a great amenity for people and the entire region, and it uses like 20 times less water than a golf course. All our large communities, we were actually the first one that did the pilot in the country with Tampa Electric for homes where the grid was the backup. Each home had a solar panel, a battery connected to gas, and when we had the last 2 rounds of hurricanes, the entire community was dark, except there were only 2 things that were going on, and a lot of people came to appreciate that. One is the homes I described, and second, we had thought about it, and we converted all our street lights to solar and battery powered and started adding chargers to them, so when a storm hits, that's something that people have. Safety is not compromised. People do have connectivity with what we do. So I would say there isn't one answer for everything, but it's just we try to learn and use bits and pieces to make a future better than it is today. And we always like to evolve. Maybe the next one will improve upon what we did the last time. So, but we think that resonates with a lot of people, and it kind of just creates a better future for everyone.
I want to just jump in here, and anyone can respond. It doesn't just have to be you, Kartik. I think a lot of people are afraid we'll get to a point where there are no wide open spaces left in Florida. I mean, are there any limits or any guardrails to how much we can build or where we can build, or is anywhere up for grabs?
I don't think anywhere is up for grabs, right? So I like to use examples, not hypotheticals, because they don't really mean anything. So we have our Angeline community. It's 6,000 acres, yeah, fairly large. I mean, it's, we call it a city in the making, 10,000 homes, but it's also anchored by a 20 million square feet Moffitt's Life Science campus with 4 schools, with a railroad for future transit, paths that are connected for autonomous vehicles. And to answer your question, 65% of the land is preserved in its natural state. So, and I don't think you see that too much. So it's using the blend on how you respect nature and what came before you and trying to make it better. Like that's our goal. So I think people should take the natural boundaries very seriously. At least we try to, and build around that, and you could do it in a very responsible manner.
I would just add that in Hillsborough County, we have a number of tools that we are utilizing to manage growth so that we have an urban growth boundary called the Urban Service Area, which has been in place for over 30 years. And for the first time in over 30 years, we're expanding that in a large scale. But that has been a very effective tool to control growth and maintain that there is a rural area. And then other tools that we have in the toolbox are to, there's a very strong environmental lands program that has been very effective in purchasing land for environmental protection that's protected in perpetuity. And then at the same time, that's sort of on the suburban side of things that looks at the unincorporated area. Within the city, we have a number of things working with Abby's team to incentivize and focus growth and redevelopment within the city along transit corridors, within and around the major regional activity centers in downtown and West Shore and around the university area. So we really look at it as being a balance of trying to accommodate and encourage growth where we want it to happen in the areas where we have the infrastructure and where we want to focus the redevelopment, the infill, all those major catalyst projects that get all the exciting press. And then also accommodating the suburban growth that's going to continue to occur, but in a very managed and controlled way through that urban growth boundary.
You asked about our protected lands or natural lands and things like that. I think there's also a big move to bring nature back into our urban environment. And I think at GasWorks, we're really trying to add a lot of green space in our individual properties and the apartment communities, but also parks and walkable streetscapes that have shade trees and a lot of plantings and things like that. If you look at a project like Water Street, for instance, which we had the pleasure of working on the phase 1 and are working on the phase 2, that project would not look like that 20, 30 years ago. And I just want to also say it's really, really hard to build in urban environments. And Casey can talk about this, but it's extremely expensive and difficult to do infill mixed-use projects, right? It's very easy to build, well, not very easy. I want to also be clear. I love what Kartik is doing at Angeline. I do, and he and I are friends. But he won't argue with me. It's very easy to develop pasture, right? That's the easiest, cheapest thing to develop. He's doing a great job at Angeline and building a mixed-use power economic hub of that area. But at GasWorks, we're really trying to bring green space back into the urban setting, which is otherwise parking lots and industrial spaces and polluted land from the gas plant that was there. So I think that there is a trend to do both, right? Bring nature back into our urban environment, build smartly, and also, when we are developing further out, try to protect as much land as we can so that the public and the people that are living in these new communities can enjoy that as well. Because at the end of the day, people come to Tampa Bay, they come to Florida to experience that Florida environment, right? Our beaches, our waterways, the nature. We have incredible public lands. It's funny, I just ran into Carlton Ward on the way here, right? I don't know if y'all know about Carlton Ward, but the Florida Wildlife Corridor, it's some of the most interesting things going on with protecting natural lands in the country, if not the world. So please look him up. He's a Tampa guy. It's unbelievable. Randomly, I ran into him on the way here. But my point is that people want to be around nature. They want to be around trees and around natural elements. We try to design buildings that have views to the outdoors, that are connected to the outdoors, and I think that yields a more healthy community, and it also helps environmentally in terms of stormwater reduction, heat island reduction, health and well-being in our communities, and to me, that's all resilience, right? That's all community resilience.
I just want to jump in and touch on this a minute because I think really our vision and our foresight, if you've seen, and if you haven't, please check it out. There's a new video on the Riverwalk. So I think having the vision that our former mayors and current mayor have as far as protecting one of our greatest assets, which is the river, and putting our major cultural facilities onto that. Many cities sell out their riverfronts because they can make huge amounts of money on taxes by letting development go there. And that's one thing we have not done. We have preserved that for our city and our residents and our visitors, and made those connections along a public way that is a dedicated park that will remain that way forever. And what has come to fruition now is the relationship of that asset in the center of our city to the development around it, and the connections that it is forging, not only to the buildings, but most importantly, to the people. And I think for us that I've had people from Charlotte come, and I've had people from Charleston come, and I take them and show them that our greatest cultural asset is the one that we've put in the heart of our city, and we have committed to maintain and retain openness for our residents. And if you were at Riverfest this weekend, we had over 35,000 people. We're the second best river walk in the country. And I say with great power comes great responsibility. And now, if you saw this week or last week, Unite Ashley and the whole Ashley reconfiguration that will reopen up that northern end of downtown. I know not everyone wants to live in downtown, but a lot of people want to come and visit it, and they want to come for the Straz Center or the History Museum or all of those cultural assets that we've placed in a thoughtful and foresight way that this will be a legacy of our community onto ourselves. So I think those protections that, yes, those properties could create humongous ad valorem taxes for us, but the greatest benefit we're getting from those aren't the dollars that they could generate, it's the benefit we're getting for our community. And I think continuing to have that and to realize that and to build that on the west side, and then you could go on to say that's taking trips off the road, people are walking, we're a healthier community, we're more sustainable this way. There's so many other spokes to that wheel that we need to continue to build. The streetcar expansion, going up to the YMCA and those things. So I think always valuing what has kept Tampa, Tampa, and protecting what have traditionally been single-family neighborhoods, but looking at redevelopment opportunities to do it right. I say that a building has, a 40-year life. I don't know, Casey, where you'd fall in this, but a building has about a 40 to a 50-year life. We get opportunities to reinvent those areas, and when we do, that is part of the legacy we're living and leaving, because we will not see the next iteration of that. What goes at the Y today and what will be built and completed and make an impact on our community will be the last time. It'll come around again sometime, but the other thing we have to think about is the balance to that. The people who live here and work here need to be able to do so. And that's one thing in my world of housing affordability. We're predominantly a service sector community. Is that sustainable? We still, coming here and passing the port and the port operations, we need to be mindful that a good city takes all sorts of pieces. It's not just the water streets. It is having the port. It's having MacDill Air Force Base. It's having all of these things working together for our own long-term sustainability. And what drives that too is the people that work there. And they need to be able to live here. Having to drive an hour to work, or those people taking their wages and spending it in another community is not sustainable. So being able to balance the housing affordability into the service sector is everything that makes our city great. It's also the challenges we face as we continue to grow.
Thank you for that. I'm going to move on so we can hit all of our questions, but great answer. So last hurricane season, we heard from a lot of readers who said that they were concerned that the rapid pace of development was making flooding worse. There was a lot of reporting from the Times that found that outdated stormwater and flood drainage systems in certain areas were overwhelmed. So I guess first off, what can the public sector and different municipalities do to solve for this and make sure that we're able to preserve our flood and stormwater systems?
And what can the private sector do? Please stop turfing your property. Please stop, because it does not flow. It is not pervious surface. So please stop doing those things. I think it's a partnership on what we all can do. You know, please stop blowing your leaves into the stormwater drains, because that doesn't help either. We have to work together. We have to work together. This is not just a public sector problem, and it's not just a public sector responsibility. It is all of our responsibility. And I think we are looking at, and we already have committed to, we're already out, the city is already out repairing and preparing for the upcoming storm season, including the installation of temporary pumps, including the installation of permanent pumps, including the installation of generators. The other thing that goes with that is, though, these generators aren't going to be placed at ground level where they're going to get flooded. They're going to be placed in an area where they're going to work when the water comes in. That might not look so fancy, you know, so this is all about trade-offs and balance. And like I said, partnership both with the public and the homeowners. I think that the storm season was tough, and I know, I'm out there, I know that people are not back in their homes. I know driving here, I could still see the water line on the houses in the Palmetto Beach area, and it's heartbreaking, but it's not something we're the only city facing. You know, I look at California and the houses that burnt down, and you look and they say, well, what do you do about development? You just don't develop there anymore. Well, you know, it's a lot, and it's a lot on our infrastructure system, and we're on it. I mean, we're undertaking it.
I believe there's a regional stormwater study that's
Assessment.
undergoing, that's a city and county study, including Plant City and Temple Terrace, where they're looking at a whole host of different, like, why these problems occurred, and then what are a whole host of solutions that can be employed, because I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all type of situation. And it might not, the solution may be different in different parts of our community. And I think there is a role that, that development can play as being a part of the solution. And some of the older parts of our community, you look at areas like in the university area where along Fowler Avenue, it's almost entirely impervious surface. That's not the standard today. So if there is redevelopment along a corridor like that, that redevelopment could really improve the stormwater situation along that corridor. So that's an example of how redevelopment could really improve the stormwater situation. So, but that's how it could occur in one area, and in a different area where it's a green field, it might be a different standard in a different situation. And so I think it's really not a one-size-fits-all solution, and we need to let that study play out to see what all the solutions are and how they can best be deployed.
Right. Abby, as you pointed out, this is not just on the shoulders of our public officials. A lot of people say, builders like Casey, Kartik, they say there's too many people moving here, they're overwhelming our systems. There's not enough resources to go around. Like, what do you say to that? How, if you're going to build and going to build dense, can you build in a way and that helps mitigate some of the flooding? Or what are you doing at some of your projects that you think will help with these problems?
So at the central, I mentioned the amenity deck. So we have a parking garage in the center of the site that's about a little a little over an acre, almost an acre and a half in size. And so the roof of that parking garage is about 70% green when we complete. So you won't have stormwater runoff coming off of the top of that large piece of concrete that would typically just be either exposed cars or whatever. It would just pour water into the system and down the sides. And so, and we're also on that project, the roof of the workforce housing is also a green roof. Similar, also heat capture, rain capture, all of those things. So we're being very mindful at the Y. All of the major roofs at the Y are green. Again, trying to mitigate a little bit of that impact as densification continues to happen in and around us. And so when we do our part, we're trying to be responsible about it.
I think in greenfield settings, with the regulations, it gives an inherent, I would say, a different setting and a little bit of an advantage. Because you mentioned about the storm studies, some of the other, generators, and those are the things that are already factored in. The roads are typically higher, the homes are set much higher. All the lift stations already have backup generators. The way we design the parks are that they do end up into like overflow areas if the ponds end up overflowing with hurricanes to, help absorb that and hold that. So I'd say, that just over time, in one way, as regulations evolve, that kind of does help creating and mitigating some of these things by building more resilient infrastructure, because you are building to a much newer, higher standard based on, more current data than, infrastructure that has been around for maybe 50 years or 100 years. And as you all said, super hard to retrofit. So that, I think just by the nature of that, it just makes it slightly better for everyone.
And at GasWorks, we are raising all of the roads, right? And the new codes, there's been a lot of changes to the building code in the last 50 years. And a lot of the new codes are really good, especially when it comes to flooding and things like that. But we're also undergrounding the utilities and working with TECO to underground our utilities to kind of mitigate the impact of wind affecting the grid there. It also adds a lot of beauty and allows for more pleasant street environment, I believe. But all of the infrastructure is being replaced, all of the utilities are being undergrounded, all the buildings are thinking about these things and meeting the current codes. And I think it's not about what can the public sector do and what can the private sector do. Let's be honest, the public sector and the private sector are working together every single day for all of these things. And if we can figure out how a project like GasWorks, a project like the Central, a project like Cartix project can provide value to our public sector, and they're doing it every single day. That is the message that we need to figure out how to tell the community, because in my opinion, redevelopment and new development should not be bad. It should not be a bad word. Bad development should be a bad word, but not new development and redevelopment, because the honest answer is that we are going to have to build new communities in terms of rebuilding buildings, redeveloping areas over the next 100 years. We're just going to have to. And so let's embrace that and do it in the right way rather than making the developer the enemy and then, not getting anything in return. You're getting the same parking lot that's sitting there degrading our community, not paying taxes, et cetera.
So going off of that, obviously we live in Florida. There are hurricanes. There have always been hurricanes. Hurricanes destroy our homes and our buildings. I know a few of you have mentioned how much the building code has improved in the last 50 years. Of course, after Hurricane Andrew, there was a major overhaul, and we've seen a lot of upgrades since then. But I mean, our storms are going to keep getting more intense. We're seeing that. I mean, look at this past storm season. That's the worst we've seen in 100 years here. As storms continue to get more intense, how can we create buildings that are more resilient? I mean, do we have to rely just on the building code? Is there something we can do to ensure that every time a storm comes in, we're not having to rebuild entire communities?
I think, in general, I would say that at Gasworks and other projects that we're working on, they're all thinking about this. The minimum flood height and all of the codes are pretty good from a structural wind. Hurricane Andrew, Miami-Dade is sort of the standard, and that's followed. And I'd say generally, if everything's built well, it's going to do okay. I'm really involved with the Urban Land Institute, ULI Tampa Bay, and Lee's here in the back. We had the Flood Center from St. Pete come and speak to us, and they kind of argued that maybe the storm seasons don't have to get worse every single year, that it could be up and down, right? So I think in general, preparing for the worst but hoping for the best is a great strategy, and I think looking at how we protect these assets that we have that are already in place that are not built to the new code is going to be the real challenge, right? TGH with their water dams, right, saved a lot of infrastructure and people during the storms. And I think that we need to continue to get smart about that. If you go to other cities around the country, those dams have become more standard, and a lot of retrofitting of assets is going to have to occur to be ready for that. And I think there's a huge insurance story, design story, development story, but Casey's pretty bullish on developing more buildings. So, are you concerned about the storm season or future storm seasons, Casey?
Of course. No, listen, I think if you drove Boca Grande 2 days after, name the last 3 major storms that crossed through there, I mean, the houses that were built in the last 15 years, there's not even a soffit board missing. So as the neighborhoods turn over, the useful life of a building is 50 years, I think you're going to see more resilience in the community. You're going to have areas that the water comes in, it's very inconvenient and destructive or whatever it is, but when it goes out, within 36 to 48 hours, everybody's back to normal. And I just believe that it's just a part of kind of regrowth and renewal in the community as these houses and structures get updated and rebuilt, they'll be more resilient when the storms come through. And then as far as protecting our older assets and everything, I mean, we just have to get better at flood proofing and the dams and all the things that we're doing. I mean, we're doing it now. We install flood panels on any existing structure that doesn't need to be raised or can't be raised because it's historic, and we're taking the steps on all of these projects and so that it's resilient, so that yes, if it happens, it's going to happen, but it doesn't disrupt life in a major way.
I'd like to jump in and answer that from a little bit of a different side. I mean, we were on the front lines immediately following the hurricanes, met with many people, many homeowners, south of Gandy, Palmetto Beach, Davis Islands, that this is their homes. This is where they've made their lifelong investments. And many people have been in their homes. I met with a husband and wife from Culberth Isle that they've been in their home for 36 years. And they only wanted to know where they fell in line with the 50% rule. And are they going to have to raise their home? And I don't know that it's necessarily the city's decision. You know, we worked it out. We looked at their numbers, and they could fix their home instead of demolishing it and rebuilding it. And as we concluded the conversation together, you know, the question was, is this going to happen again? And the answer is yes. I just don't know when. I don't know if you're going to fix your home and it's going to be 10 years or 15 years or 20 years. And the woman looked at me and she said, you know, I had my children in this home and they've gotten married and my grandchildren are in this home, and I'm willing to take the risk that if I repair it, I might have another 36 years. And I feel like it's important that our residents and our property owners get the right to make those choices. Now, that being said, the other side to that coin is if you come in and tell me I want to take my house down and build a new house, clearly you're going to be in a safer position. But in the state, typically, we are a very private property rights-driven state, and while we benefit substantially from our participation in the National Flood Insurance Program, you get 25% right now. We're working very hard through some of the changes I mentioned earlier to be able to offer a 35% reduction in the flood insurance premiums. That also comes at a responsibility on the part of the municipality to implement these new codes. So I think that there's a myriad of answers. I don't know that there is one right answer, but I do think that as we look forward and as the climate and the fabric changes, if you haven't driven through South Tampa and you haven't driven through Davis Island to see the homes that are no longer there, that might not be your neighborhood, but there is definitely a change in our community as far as what it looks like. We're looking now to kind of see home sales and different things that have happened, but I think we need to be forward-thinking, but we also need to be respectful of our residents and the decisions that they're making and the realities that they're making them under as we move forward.
And before we jump into our audience questions, just lastly, at what point do we need to reconsider where we build? Like, for any of you, do you feel there are neighborhoods here that are just too risky to develop? No one wants to answer that one.
I don't know that there are places that are too risky to develop. I would agree with Abby that we're a strong property rights state, and people have entitlements and should have the opportunity to continue to utilize the rights that they have. Our plans allow for them to have the density or intensity of development that they have allowed. What we have recommended in our plan that's going to be going to City Council later this month, we'll see what they decide to do with it, is that we should be directing future growth and increases in density away from what we call the coastal high hazard area. And that is essentially the first evacuation zone and the most vulnerable area. And that we shouldn't be allowing additional increases in density, either through density bonuses or amendments to our comprehensive plan that increase density. So adding any more population growth to that area because of its vulnerability. So people can keep what they have and those rights, but not add more to it. But I don't know that I would ever go so far as saying we should retreat from somewhere.
I'll give a really smug answer that Graham from Kettler might appreciate or not, but I'll say that the insurance companies are telling you where the most risk is, and you'll pay the price in your insurance rate, your insurance premium, or you'll decide you don't want to, or they won't write you at all. But I think that, GasWorks or any other project that we're working on, that is a real factor. We want to figure out how to build better, to do things in the right locations, to mitigate any sort of impact to a project based on what we think is going to happen, to reduce the cost of insurance, because that's a factor in any development deal. And I think, Casey and his team and Kartik, I'm sure you all as well, that is a big part of your overall ongoing operations and maintenance cost. And that is something that needs to be factored in terms of how we're investing in our infrastructure and how where we're building and how we're building.
You're right. That's one of the first questions that we get from our builders. Hey, will our future homeowners have to pay a flood insurance premium, or did you raise the home high enough that you don't have to? And 9 out of 10 times it's like, no, we raised it high enough, you don't have to worry about, and you'll be fine. So I think it goes back to, I don't think you want to stay out of any area. It's just back to the theme of the entire talk today, just being smart and responsible on how you do it. So it makes sense for everyone.
Okay, well, with that, I'm going to turn to some of our audience questions. First up, what current policies like Live Local can be implemented to promote infill?
Oh, I mean, I think the Live Local Act is definitely driving infill opportunities, but I think.
Do you want to give just a quick summary for people who might not know
Oh,
about
sure,
Live Local?
absolutely. So the Live Local Act was passed by the legislature a couple of years ago and has been modified each year since. In fact, it has even been modified during this session to allow for projects that have a minimum of 40% of affordable housing to go into commercial and industrial zoned properties without having to go for local government approval. So we have several that have been approved. None have gone under construction yet, but that opens up properties that were typically focused on providing commercial or industrial uses for potential housing uses. And a lot of times, those commercial and industrial properties are not within the coastal high hazard area or on more coastal kind of flood prone areas. So I'm not sure if it has direct correlation. I think one thing we're looking at as part of the code update is really allowing residential in a lot of districts. It's not currently allowed by right, which would make it more attractive in the central planning areas versus people going in for rezonings to get those permissions. So
one of the challenges that I've seen with the Live Local is that we haven't, because it allows for residential in places where we haven't historically planned for residential, we haven't necessarily planned for things like sidewalks or transit to those areas. And so now we kind of need to reconfigure how we're thinking about those areas to think about them as places where people might be living, and think about how we're aligning the infrastructure to accommodate for that.
Alrighty, how will new developments involve sustainable energy like solar or geothermal? Sorry, the handwriting here, that gives significantly more energy than we now provide.
I mean, it isn't that hard. I mean, after all, we live in the Sunshine State, so you'd think it shouldn't be that hard. But the reality is sometimes some of the regulations get in the way. So from our perspective, we try super hard to have maybe, like, the example I gave, have a central energy plant, have solar, have gas, where the grid is a backup. And we've tried to do a lot more of that. But I mean, honestly, regulations are not super friendly in the Sunshine State. So I try not to make comments on policy. They get me in trouble quickly, so I'll just leave it at that.
Tico's here. Tico's here. Is my mic on? Okay. We do a ton of solar work, and we worked on the City of Tampa's solar feasibility study, did that analysis. In the back room, there's a great chart that our team put together with the City of Tampa Green team's back there, but that chart there is the Hannah Avenue project, which we worked on all of that project. That project is offset by solar by an estimated 82%. City of Tampa, Hannah Avenue, 82% offset by on-site solar, okay? We have a lot of buildings that want to do solar that it's hard because they don't have enough roof area, and it's really expensive to build a structure to put solar on. And years ago, I might have said something different, but what I will say is that TECO is investing in a significant amount of grid utility scale solar. And not only that, we worked on their energy demonstration center down in Apollo Beach at Big Bend. That we need to work with TECO to make their mix of energy the cleanest energy around. And I think it's possible, and I think solar on roofs is great, battery backup is great, great resiliency on a residential level especially. I've done multiple net zero energy homes and projects. I've done a lot of geothermal. Does anyone know the Pearl by Armature Works? Do you know that project? Do you know that that's a geothermal project? That's probably one of the largest geothermal projects in the region. And we worked on that project as well. But TECO can be a partner in this, and we need to advocate and work with them to invest in cleaner energy, and I know that they are. And there's really cool things that the city and others are studying around hydroelectric, and I think we just need to be smarter about our energy mix. And again, going back to, let's not waste energy, right? The more energy that all of us are consuming is the more energy that TECO has to put on the grid and plan for. And when we get to peak moments where we're all turning on our AC, they have to turn on the dirtiest power that they own because they don't have enough capacity with their newer units, right? And I'm not an expert in this, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. And they're a partner, and we need to work with them, and we need to plan and advocate for what we want and where we want to live. And I think that's something that is important. But for instance, at Gasworks, there's a lot of buildings, but the roof area just does not allow for a lot of solar, and it's just a fact. And so where else can renewable energy go? That's something that we can just make sure that that energy on the grid is that much cleaner.
Yeah, and I think as technology increases and the solar panels get more efficient, you'll see a lot more use in the urban environment with commercial uses. It's just right now, the panel is just not quite efficient enough for the small roof areas and the urban markets, and it'll get there.
I should have said that Ellison worked on the Pearl as well. They were the contractor on that project, so they did it.
Yeah, and geothermal works there because of the elevation of that site. There are areas in the city where geothermal will not work because the groundwater is too caustic, and you just can't long-term maintain a system with the salt in the water.
There's been lots of attention on new development as a solution to growth, but what about aging development, not just for condo towers, which now under new laws are being required to undergo certain safety guidelines, but also aging subdivisions or housing in large swaths of Pinellas and Hillsborough?
Yeah, I think a major part of our plans is retaining and maintaining our existing housing stock and making sure that that is well maintained, that we maintain the character of our existing neighborhoods. That's something that we heard a lot about in the city of Tampa as we were updating their plan, was that there's a lot of tension, as particularly in some of the infill neighborhoods, about as they're seeing a lot of the redevelopment, those infill neighborhoods are feeling a lot of pressure to maintain their character, and that's something they're really struggling with as they're seeing a lot of the older housing stock be torn down, bigger homes built, or sometimes replaced with two homes. They don't necessarily have the same massing or style of homes, and they kind of overwhelm the rest of the neighborhood. And so that's something that I think the community's struggling with, and that we need to try and wrestle with, and I think we're hopeful maybe we can figure out some solutions as we work through the code update. And it's really exciting as a planner that the comprehensive plan is getting updated and then the code is getting updated. I probably sound like a planning geek to say all of that, but this is a like once in a lifetime opportunity that we have to align the vision for Tampa through the comprehensive plan and then have the code come along and be updated. It's very exciting. So
I'll geek out with you, Melissa.
Okay, yay.
Melissa and I went to grad school together years ago, so I'll geek out with you for a few planner minutes. But I think definitely, and I think that's protecting. There's nothing wrong with old neighborhoods. They're great. I mean, and protecting what is there is important. I think looking at one of the challenges we face is adaptive reuse. When something really shouldn't be used as a house anymore, and One of the more recent challenges, we had a small business that wanted to go into Ybor with a bookstore, and it was going into an old house, and to come up to code and have to meet everything, it was making it almost impossible. And I think we need to be more thoughtful in those opportunities, that we have those good bones that can create those spaces and result in more sustainability of serving those neighborhoods. Maybe they were typically single-family neighborhoods, but now on the periphery, we might have the opportunity to create those walkable places, or to, so looking at that. And then Melissa touched on it. As the new Tampa Forward comes forward, there are design standards in there that are looking at the placement of these new homes next to, or new commercial developments on the periphery of single-family neighborhoods, and how we need to treat that in order to respect what has been there, and to create that interface of that new development with those typical, the historic development, not historic from a designation sense, but historic from a sense of that has been the pattern of that community, and ensure those protections. Those protections are critical, and that is definitely at the forefront of the code update.
I think at Gasworks, it's really interesting because it's not single family, but we're partially in a historic district, partially not. But the new projects, for instance, La Union, the new apartment complex that was just delivered late last year, if you go in, it's a lot of history about Ybor and a lot of verbiage that feels like Ybor, and trying to tie that cultural kind of feeling of what Ybor City is to the overall new development. And I think that's really important, to honor the sense of place, but really in a place that there never was a place, right? Not meaningfully. So I think that's important, and I also think that being able to recognize that that sense of place and those historic designations provide value to the community, and what do you protect and what do you not protect. For instance, at the Tampa Heights Y project that Casey can talk about, there's a really cool building that's very historic. It's not historically protected, but I fought really hard to keep that building as part of the project, and Casey and his team really supported that in creating a scale that's more, that feels like this was the place, right? But there's new development all around it. So I think contextually, and it's really important. We have a great history, we have great culture. Tampa Bay is such an amazing place from that perspective, and I think we need to honor that and bring it forward into the new development, as well as keep what we want to keep in the existing community.
I just want to say that right to the west of Gasworks, I mean, we're putting 7 infill homes through our housing program that is, bordered by Nebraska and Palm and the interstate, and that is a testament to being able to have the relationships of single family in proximity to new development, and that, I think, is something that we are mindful of and we are thoughtful of, and not one at the cost of the other.
Here's another one. There is huge growth in installation of artificial grass and fake plastic lawns. Risks of microplastics leaching into the environment and as urban temperature increases exist. Are these things being considered by the city or county, and should restrictions on fake grass be implemented? And I will toss that to our private sector folks too. Is that something y'all are thinking about?
I'll give you an easy answer. We just don't allow them with the HOA restrictions. You can't do that. Just keeps it simple.
I think the legislature just said we have to allow it. I believe I read a bill that I'm not sure if it's been signed by the governor yet, that said local governments cannot prohibit people from putting turf in. It's a problem, and we just started permitting it, and we've been met with a lot of challenges in that respect. But what we see happen a lot of the times is that people get their CO for their home, they're done, and the next weekend the turf goes in. You know, we also see they get the CO for their home, and the next weekend they're selling their trees on Facebook. I mean, it's almost like unthought of that we don't see the forest from the trees, so to speak. But our new regulations are that we have a pervious standard. If you want to put turf in, we do have a pervious standard that you can put it in under, and there are specifications to that, and you do come in and get a permit. And then we have, if you don't meet those standards, you are considered impervious, and you now must take care of the water that you are creating on your property. And I'm not sure that us doing that didn't force the legislation that's actually up in Tallahassee right now. And the other thing is we need to keep it out of our rights of way. What we see is that people put it out in front of their home past the sidewalk, and then it's in the right of way, and it is impacting the stormwater systems. There is no doubt to that. And we are trying to handle it. City of St. Pete Beach did prohibit it. They said no turf, and then they went out and they made everybody who had it take it out. But that, again, is one of those places you get to that's like, it's my property. I should be allowed to do with it what I want. Yes, but you shouldn't be able to adversely impact our stormwater system that we are facing as a city and we're maintaining as a city. So that is definitely a hot button that has risen to the top in the past, I would say, past 5 years. It really, people don't want to mow their lawn, they don't want to water it, and there are other choices besides turf. So I think we need to do some work on that and get a little smarter on that.
Given several prior regional planning initiatives focused on sustainably developing the area, how do we actually prevent repeating history and our current patterns of urban sprawl that are depleting resources and assets and diminishing our quality of life?
Well, I guess I would say that the past initiatives haven't completely failed. I've been with the Planning Commission for the last 20-some years, and it's not all been a success by any means. But the urban service area that I talked about, it has largely stayed in the same place for 30 years. Now, when it was originally put in place in the early 90s, it was really big. And it included things all the way out past Fishhawk, way down past Big Bend Road. I mean, areas that are filling in now. And so it now seems like all of that is unplanned, but it was planned back in the 90s that all of that growth was going to happen. Some of those things, like Fishhawk, was approved before there ever was a comprehensive plan, and we had to recognize that it was there. A number of the developments in South Hillsborough County were that way, and so the plan that was put in place when we started having state-mandated planning in the mid-'80s had to recognize kind of this patchwork of what was so, and then make a plan around that made some sense, and the urban service area tied all that together. And it stayed that way for 30-some years. I would call that largely a success, that we haven't, that we held that line, that we did not expand for quite some time. I think that to some degree contributed to the fact that we started to see some redevelopment in places in the city and in places around the university area, because we constrained some of the demand. The developers don't like that we constrained the demand. Because they wanted us to keep pushing that line outward.
Certain kinds of developers.
Well, there you go, yes.
Not
you're-
every
You're right, yes, thank you, yes. Thank you for that clarification.
Not
You're right, sorry. Certain types of developers. There've been lots of debate on that topic through my career about when we should have moved the line, and so I think to some degree, the plan held. And now we're at the point where that urban service area has largely filled up. Now, the one space where I think there has been a significant challenge, and we've really been hamstrung, has been on the infrastructure keeping up with that growth. And that has, we used to have certain tools in our toolbox, like transportation concurrency, which particularly in unincorporated area was a very powerful tool to keep roadway infrastructure keeping up with that type of suburban growth. That in 2011 was taken away by the state legislature. So we now, development pays its impact fee and is allowed to go forward and develop. And so, and it takes a long time to collect all of the impact fees to make the type of roadway investment and improvement that's needed to keep up with the development that's happened in, say, a South Hillsborough County. So they're rightly frustrated in areas like that about the growth and the infrastructure not having kept up. But I don't know. I guess I wouldn't say that it has all failed. It's not all been a success either.
Not to keep you in the hot seat, but
Sure.
you mentioned impact fees.
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit more for people who might not be familiar? And can you talk about, are there any solutions or ideas to make sure that developers who are building in our communities are investing in our communities as well and helping us keep up with all that infrastructure?
Yeah, developers pay a number of impact fees for transportation, water, sewer, schools, parks. It depends on the local government whether they have impact fees for things like libraries, public safety. But the real key are those fees keeping up with the costs. So depending on the local government, they may have a requirement that the fees be revisited on a certain cycle. Hillsborough County, for example, I think is revisiting their fees this year. Abby can talk about that.
We haven't revisited, I mean, we're in the process of looking at ours now. We haven't updated them in a while.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and we still have concurrency for certain pieces of infrastructure. At least in some local governments, we still have it for schools. So if there's not school capacity, the development's not going to get built. If water, sewer, but the transportation, at least in the unincorporated area, the city of Tampa largely was a concurrency exception area. But in the unincorporated area, that was really a tool that was very powerful to get the infrastructure keeping up with the growth.
Can I add to that? I think what we're talking about is where people develop and why they develop there. And I think that as someone who was born and raised in Tampa, who never thought I was going to live in Tampa because I lived in urban sprawl, and I came back here and
did you live in Brandon?
no.
Oh, just checking.
But Abby was talking about the streetcar and the Riverwalk, and those were two things that kept me. I came back here to start my company. I was going to leave again, and then Mayor Buckhorn got elected and said, "I'm going to finish the Riverwalk." And I think that's the single most important piece of infrastructure that the city has built in probably 40 years. The streetcar is also an important infrastructure asset. We need to expand both of those, and we need to invest in even better infrastructure to encourage the billions and billions of dollars of development that will occur around transit infrastructure, pedestrian infrastructure, healthy ecosystems. And Abby, I don't know if you know the number, you probably do. Whether the development is right on the water on the river or adjacent to the Riverwalk, there's probably somewhere in the range of $10 billion worth of development happening along the Riverwalk right now. Think about the property taxes. Think about the sales taxes. Think about the impact fees and the development fees and the permit fees that are generated because the city built really high-quality infrastructure. I think development trends are changing. I think market demands are changing, and people want to live in walkable communities that have access to a lot of amenities, that are mixed use. But not everybody wants that, right? Some people want to live that urban lifestyle. They want a single-family home. Kartik is developing a completely different community than his firm was probably 5 years ago or 10 years ago.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Totally different than 10 years back, yeah.
So my point is that we have to understand and think about where we want to live and what we want our community to be. And I think projects like GasWorks, projects like the Tampa Heights YMCA development, projects like Water Street, projects like a lot of the stuff going on in St. Petersburg is really about providing supply of real estate product and homes that was not there before that the market has been demanding. That's why the prices are so high. It's because there's not enough of it. We need a lot more of it. And guess what? Those investments in the urban area protect the rural areas. They allow those communities to exist further out. If you want to drive in your car 45 minutes each way to work, go for it, bud. But we have to provide what people really want, which is, especially the younger people that are staying, they want a different lifestyle than someone that has a family or that is older. And we have to understand that and provide them what they want. That's affordable housing, providing more supply. And
All right, well, I think that's a good note to end it on. We're pretty much at time. But thank you so much to our lovely panelists here. I learned a lot. I hope our audience did as well. Another big thank you to our sponsor, Tampa Electric, for their continued support of our sustainability series. None of this would be possible without you all. A couple more notes. This event was recorded, so if you registered online, you'll be receiving a link in your email. You could watch it back. But additional articles and other resources will be posted to our Spotlight webpage, along with more information about our next events. And before you head out, just make sure you stop by the Tampa Bay Times booth to learn more about becoming a subscriber. If you already are a subscriber, thank you so much for your support. That's what allows us to keep doing great work. That's what gets me paid, so thank you. But if you are a subscriber, we also have more information on how you can make the most of that subscription and all the perks that come with that. And lastly, if you do have the Tampa Bay Times app on your phone, if you show it to Paul on your way out, you will get a free gift. But that's it. That's all I got for you for coming out. And I hope you have a great evening.